Today I'm working on a request from a viewer named What the Beep. He wanted to know more about the Mulberry Bottling Works in Polk County, Florida. So let's go see what we can find on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. So he sent me a photo of his beautiful hutch from Mulberry Bottling Works in Mulberry, Florida. And he said the company was incorporated around 1901. So let's get started. Now, I've tried looking for some company records for 1901, but this is the first thing that I find. It's a newspaper article in March 1906 saying that the Mulberry Bottling Works plant is open and it's ready to start taking orders. It also states that the plant is owned and managed by a J.B. Smith. John Bunyan Smith was born in 1874 in South Carolina. I'm not sure when he moves to Florida, but by 1898, he's marrying Mary Della Hart in Polk County. He's 24. I like how he took his very common name, John Smith, and decided to go by J. Bunyan Smith for most of his business and public dealings. So we saw 1906 is when the plant opened. By 1910, we see John's family. He and Della have 4 children now. They end up having 6. He's also got his mother-in-law living with them. That must be fun. Keeping in chronological order, the next record that we come across is March 1913 newspaper article. It says, "It is acknowledged everywhere throughout Polk County that Mulberry has the best bottling works in the state. It is well known that the product of the Mulberry Bottling Works is pure and excellent. For J. Bunyan Smith, the proprietor, will not send out from his factory anything but the best. By sending out only honestly prepared goods from a well-equipped plant, Mr. Smith has built up a demand for his products which is not confined to Polk County. Because of the increased demand, Mr. Smith is arranging to establish another first-class bottling works in Lakeland. He has purchased new machinery and will soon have the plant in operation." They weren't kidding. 2 months later, in May 1913, we see another newspaper article. J. Bunyan Smith, manager of the Lakeland and the Mulberry Bottling Works, owns a fine automobile and shares it with his friends. What a nice guy. But I found it important to point out that he's the manager of both plants right now. We next come up to January 1914. Mr. J. Bunyan Smith is again in the newspaper. "Mr. Griffin met death in a particular and tragic manner this morning when en route from Plant City to Lakeland in a machine driven by J. Bunyan Smith." Is this his fancy new automobile? "The left front tire suddenly burst while the car was going about 18 miles an hour. The impact was so great that Mr. Griffin's neck was instantly broken. Mr. Smith escaped without any serious injury, but he did have a broken thumb and some bruises." Here's an article that doesn't really have anything to do with anything, but I left it in because I thought it was interesting. March 1914, this is 2 months after the accident, Mulberry Bottling Works is selling a pair of mules. Just that mules were still being used as equipment is interesting, you know? 1914 just doesn't seem to be a good year for our guy, John Smith. November 1914. About 10 months after his accident, here he is involved in another accident. A big 7-passenger touring car, occupied by J. Bunyan Smith of Mulberry and his chauffeur, Harry Howard, collided head-on with an empty automobile in front of Mr. Block's house, demolishing Mr. Block's car. Mr. Howard, the chauffeur, was arrested on a charge of drunk and reckless driving. He's out on $100 bond, which Mr. Smith paid. In the 1915 City Directory, we see Lakeland Coca-Cola Bottling Works, along with Mulberry Bloodwine Bottling Company. Now I was trying to figure out why it's called Mulberry Bloodwine. At first, I thought Bloodwine was the name of a person, but it's the name of a drink. I'd never heard of this drink. Then come to find out, in the same directory, that John Smith is not the proprietor of the Mulberry plant anymore. Now it's being run by a guy named Henry Payne. John Bunyan Smith is still running the Lakeland plant though. Unfortunately, on Ancestry, city directories don't begin for Mulberry until 1915. So I can't tell you how Payne got to this position, but I can see that in the 1910 census he was a real estate agent, so it doesn't look like he comes from a bottling background. So we're now up to the 1917 city directory. The Mulberry and the Lakeland plants are still running. The city directory skips 1918, but then in the year 1919, Lakeland is still running, but Mulberry isn't listed anymore. I can't find Payne in the directory either. And then the next year in the 1920 census, Payne is the proprietor at a garage. So I think Mulberry Bottling Works has been closed down by now. I don't see any mention of Mulberry Bottling Works after this time. So it looks like Henry Payne was just doing some odd jobs until he died in 1947. As for John Bunyan Smith, beginning in 1919, we see his interests start to switch from bottling to more political. Mr. J. Bunyan Smith makes his entry in the political arena as a candidate for commissioner from Ward 4. He's a fine businessman, and it is believed by his friends that his political attainments would be valuable to the city in the position which he aspires. I hereby announce my candidacy for commissioner from Ward 4 and promise to give my best efforts to serve all the people of the city if I'm elected. The next year, in 1920 census, it shows him still running the bottling plant. In 1923, he's running for mayor. He's still running the Lakeland plant in 1923 and 1924. But then in 1925, we see J. Bunyan Smith is the president of Smith Wright Company. Now, I can't find what this company is about. The Lakeland plant is still going, but I don't know who's running it. In 1926, he's listed as president of the Smith Wright Company and also mayor commissioner of Lakeland. Now, Wright is a dude named Alonzo Wright. Again, I don't know what this company is doing. In 1930 census, J. Bunyan Smith is listed as a citrus grower. By 1935, he's listed in government. He died in 1967 at age 93. He had moved to Tennessee for the last almost 10 years of his life. So, to recap, Mulberry Bottling Works, as far as I can tell, began in 1906. Hutch bottles weren't produced after 1912, so this particular bottle should have been produced between 1906 and 1912. Then it seems that the Mulberry plant was renamed to Mulberry Blood Wine Company around 1915. So I would imagine that bottles would have had that name on it. And then we see the Mulberry plant disappear around 1917 or 18. I managed to find a website that talked about the Lakeland plant, and it says that in 1937, the Lakeland Coca-Cola Bottling Company moved from its third Lakeland location on Lincoln Avenue to a new brick building on the east side of Lake Mirror. The building still bears the Coca-Cola logo. The company used this building for Coca-Cola until the early 1970s. Then they sold the building to Goodwill. Today, the building is used for administration offices for the Lakeland Fire Department. And that's all I've got for today. And if you have a bottle that you would like me to research, you can email me at antiquebottlestories@outlook.com. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.